This video covers the 116-mile, 2-hour drive from the Willow Inn RV Park in Hurricane, Utah, up to the Red Canyon RV Park in Panguitch, Utah. I wouldn't call the Red Canyon RV Park a resort by any means, but it was an okay place since we were out sightseeing all day and just sleeping there at night. After getting set up, we drove into town to find a place to eat and check out what was in town. This Cowboys Smokehouse was recommended, and Denise got to have her photo taken with John Wayne outside. After dinner, we took a ride through the Red Canyon in the Dixie National Forest, and you can see why they call it the Red Canyon. That evening, we also drove over to where the entrance to the Bryce Canyon National Park was, and I had to get the required sign photo. And the following day, I actually changed shirts because we found that we were going to be going up a lot higher in elevation, and getting a little cool effect. We were up at over 9,000 feet. Bryce Canyon's a beautiful place, and I'm just going to let the photos speak for themselves. It's a well-maintained park, and I saw it as very visitor-friendly. A lot of the cliff edges had railings and places to set, and a lot of lookout points, and it was probably one of our favorite. It's a very unusual place, and there's nothing like it anywhere else that I know of in the world. Definitely something you need to put on your bucket list. One of the first stops at viewing areas that we were at was the beginning of a hiking trail. It went down into around the Hoodoos, what they call the tall spears there. It was like two trails in one. One was 1.5 miles, 2 miles, and then you could extend it and go on out to 5-some miles. I knew my knees just wouldn't hold up climbing back out of there. I mean, you went down several hundred feet. So we convinced our son to go take the hike, and he took one of my old cell phones, and he took a bunch of photos while he was hiking down in there, and that's what you're going to be seeing. And you'll see at the beginning the kind of a steep trail. There it is that you're going down into. So while he did that, wife and I, we continued on through the park and all up to the other viewing areas, and then when we got done, we come back and picked him up and took him back up there so he could see him also. Once you were down inside there, it didn't look too bad as far as hiking around, but it was just the hike down, and then you can see the hike back up is where this is a little bit more gradual, so it's not as bad going back up that way. But I still didn't want to take a chance and hurt my knees and being laid up for the rest of our trip. These are a pair of huge solar panels that are located right outside the visitor center, and they would rotate to keep facing the sun for the best efficiency. I can't imagine what the earlier settlers felt like when they traveled all the way across the country and then come over the horizon and found a place like this. This is the town of Tropic, which you can see from one of the viewing areas. And we actually stopped there for dinner after we left the park. We had quite an elevation change this day, starting at the campground probably for around 4,500 feet, and I think the entrance to the canyon was around 6,000 feet, and then we went up to Rainbow Point, it was over 9,000 feet. So it got a little bit cooler up there at the top, but it was really pleasant. And by the way, the hot dogs we got out of this gourmet food truck were really great. At one of the visitor centers, they had exhibits set up to see the prairie dog tunnels and hoodoos and how they were made, and some of the creatures that can be found in the park, and a little bit of the wildlife. It was kind of interesting. There is a campground at the park, but it was booked solid. I mean, for 6 months to a year in advance. But we took a ride through it just to see what it looked like in case we would come back out there. We could plan ahead of time and make better reservations. KODACHROME Basin is a small state park that's in the area nearby, and so we decided, well, while we're there, we got to check it out. But it was only a couple mile drive in and a couple mile back out, but it had some interesting sights to see while we were in there. After leaving the KODACHROME Basin State Park, we headed on down the road and got through part of the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument. That was quite an interesting place, and we only saw a little bit of part of it. Kind of drove through one end of it, and part of the, I think it was the highway Route 12 that goes up what they call the Hogback Bridge, and I think this is getting up into that area. There it is. You can see a drop off on both sides. A little scary. Now, these are some more cliff dwellers, and you can see way up in there little, I guess, called the mud houses that they built. It was pretty amazing and surprised me. I wonder how they even got to them. I mean, it's like a sheer cliff, and it's in the middle of the cliff somewhere. We come by the petrified forest, but it was crowded, and so we just stopped at the gate, walked around, and left. We arrived about midday at the campground, so I asked at the office, well, how far is it to the Grand Canyon? And they said, oh, it's only about 50 miles, maybe an hour or so. And so I figured, well, if we got time, to do it today, we'll just take off and get that off our bucket list. Well, as you'll find out, that was a pretty wild estimate. What I discovered was it was 50 miles just to the first turnoff. And so this was a long trip just to get going, but after we got to that point, we saw more signs, and we were committed about that time, so we had to continue on. So we got to the turnoff, and then it was another 20 plus miles to get across the desert, and then another 60 miles after we got up into the mountains and get all the way down to where the North Rim Lodge was. So that was quite a side trip in itself, a lot longer than what I expected. It took about 2.5 hours to get there, and I think it was 131 miles total. Yeah, and these are my Ford commercial photographs. As you can see, it's pretty desolate and wide open country out there. After that 20-mile drive across that valley desert, the scenery changes dramatically as we climb up into the mountains. After almost 2 hours driving through a desert environment, we finally make it up in the mountains to the entrance to the Grand Canyon National Park. This park is probably one of the most remote parks I think I've ever been to. You really have to want to go there. There's not much around to see. The lodge itself was pretty much closed up. There was no dining, and some of the rooms were closed off, but they had a little sandwich shop open that you could get, snacks. And this is a path going out to one of the more well-known viewing points. I was kind of surprised. If you look at the pathway, there's no guardrails or nothing, just those little stones laid alongside the trail marking it. And there's probably 1,000-foot drop off right on the other side of them. Yeah, that's what you're walking along the edge of with no handrails. This is the end of the trail where you got a little viewpoint you can look out. Unfortunately, it was quite hazy due to all the fires that were out west, so I couldn't get any really crisp, sharp photos. Everything was sort of hazy. This is the patio out in back of the lounge or the lodge, and everybody was sitting out there waiting for sunset, so I got back in time to take a few photos. It was pretty spectacular. These are the little cabins that you can rent there also. And there's a little small campground. After leaving Grand Canyon, we're back to Page, and I went up early one morning to the Horseshoe Bend lookout. And this is what you got. And way down there in the shoreline, there were people actually camping down there. And while I was there, a couple boats come by. You could hear them coming from a long ways away. I don't know whether these were personal boats or boats that were rented or guided tours. Going back through Page, there's the Carl Hayden Visitor Center, and that's the dam for Lake Powell. There's some dinosaur track. That's the bridge that crosses the river into Page, and there's the Hayden Dam. This is the boat ramp where everybody launches their boats, and look at that boat ramp, the angle of it and how big it is. And I was told that the people actually with RVs, large RVs, back down there to back boats into the lake. I certainly wouldn't do that. But we got a little snack, and then got curious about all the houseboats. So we went over to this area where you can rent houseboats for extended periods of time, and there they are. So we went out on the dock and kind of walked around, looked at a few of them, and then one was coming in, and the people were offloading. So we hung around, and after they were offloaded, we asked if we could go aboard and check the place out, and they said sure. So we were curious and went aboard and took pictures of everything. This is one boat that was just leaving. We watched them pack up. Now here's the inside of the one that came in, and I think it had accommodations for 8 or 10 or 12 people. Those are all little bedrooms, like you go down the steps, and then you go around another area and go up the steps, and these are other bedrooms up above the ones you saw below. Had a couple of bathrooms. The showers are packed full of all the sheets and blankets. I don't know, maybe that was something the rental place told them to do when they came back. This is the back deck, and then you can go up on the upper deck, and there's one of the helms. There's another helm downstairs, and that's a jacuzzi on the back. And they had an outdoor grill and then a freezer and like a little closet area. So that was it. I hope you enjoyed the video.